Welcome everyone, Byron White here, founder of Writer Access. Happy you could join us today. I'm here with Joel Holland. Joel, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Byron.
Right on. So we're going to take on some good challenges today and hope everyone asks us some questions along the way. So feel free to use your GoToWebinar ability to fire in questions to us. We'll bottle all the questions up in the end of the presentation and have you get some answers from us, Joel particularly being the focus, I'm sure. I'm going to walk through a deck as part of today's presentation that Joel and I have worked on and kind of show everybody what our perspective is on the marketplace and what's going on out there. I also put together some tips and advice at the end of the deck that help you perhaps understand the challenges that you face, yet in the opportunities within your reach. So without further ado, I'll say only the following. We would love to hear from you, and Twitter is a great way to do that. I have a couple Twitter addresses here, at Byron White and at VideoBlocks. So feel free to let us know how we're doing in this presentation. Share the love, share anything positive, or anything you want really. We'd love to hear from you and we'll try to respond at least after the presentation. So in general, just so everyone knows, you'll receive a copy of this deck along with links to download a couple of books and any promotions that Joel wants to toss in as well to everyone on the line. And then we're going to actually have 3 winners today of everyone that's here and has showed up for a year-long subscription to audioblocks, and then separately VideoBlocks, and then separately GraphicStock. So thank Joel and his team for doling out some cool prizes to everyone that's tuned in now. So thanks for that. And we had a great reception and response to this webinar, so we're really excited to dive in and take on some of these issues. So without further ado, keep the questions firing over in the question sections. Thanks so much for that. So we currently spend a lot of time on screen. I like using that word, on screen, because as you'll quickly learn, we have so many screens that we're looking at these days. You know, it's really quite remarkable that 8 or 9 hours of our day are spent on screen, but that is a fact, that's the reality, and I'm not sure what that's doing to our brains and our senses, but we're going to talk about that a little bit today. As a result of some deep analysis into the brain's activity, as it turns out, about 90% of the information absorbed in the brain is visual. No surprise there. Our eyes are our greatest communication tool into our brain. What we see gets to our brain extremely quickly without having to interpret it or understand it. It just arrives. And as it turns out, our brain processes visuals about 60,000 times faster than text, which is pretty interesting if you think about it. And what this all means, I'm not sure, but what it certainly means is that we need to better tap into that ability to get information to our brain in a visual sense. Much quicker time to load up our minds with information. And research has really kind of showed us that visuals, you know, improve and increase engagement by as much as 94%. There was a really cool promotion that I read recently from Getty Images. Lindsay Morris is actually speaking somewhere, and this particular promotion talks about this incredible statistic and what impact images can have. So pretty exciting stuff as we begin to see what's transpiring. There's certainly some stats backing this up. One more stat, and that's this, that viewers are 85% more likely to buy a product or a service after watching a video. Again, fairly staggering, and what's also interesting to me is how slow video continues to move as it makes its way into particularly our web world. Certainly the stats of YouTube are remarkable. You know, something like 60 hours of video are loaded up every minute at YouTube. I mean, the stats are pretty overwhelming with how much video is out there. But at the same time, it continues to be burdensome and difficult to produce videos on products and services. It seems like a production. It takes a lot of time. if you're going to do custom work. So a lot of interesting challenges there, but the stats are in the favor of wanting to invest and produce content in the video space. So the real challenge is who's going to create all these images and videos and visuals and design work we need to really tell our story in the content marketing world. And I like saying that, you know, content marketing is really an art and a science, and it's the art of understanding the wants and needs of your customers and the science of delivering to them in a compelling way. And obviously images and video and visuals are a big part of that. So the question is, who specifically is going to create that, and how can we get those visuals and things out to the marketplace so all of our work can look better? So a little brief snippet in history on graphic design. It was really kind of, graphic design became a mainstream, I would argue, thanks to 5 key individuals here that kind of brought graphic design to the mainstream. You know, some wonderful New York legends here, and particularly in the advertising industry, I believe could be held wonderfully responsible for the graphic arts profession. What's interesting about the graphic arts profession is there's never been a politician, at least that I know about, or anybody that's had a real leadership position other than leading an ad agency, of course, you know, rise to the top of the corporate channel or the political channel, at least in this country. I find that really interesting, given how much weight and emphasis and importance design has been to literally bringing products like Apple to the forefront of leadership positions despite all odds versus the PC world. You know, design clearly has its place in the corporate world, and I'm just really quite surprised that more people haven't risen to that leadership position. But if I could just comment about that before we go to the next slide, I think a lot of that might be because, in a sense, a designer isn't necessarily a leader themselves in developing a campaign. In fact, they're part of a team, and that team is what produces the campaign. It isn't one individual that has the idea and executes it and is the rock star and takes something from start to finish. I would argue graphic design is a profession where there isn't a clear hierarchy. There isn't one person on top. It's a team sport, if you will. And I think designers think that way, which is quite interesting. So anyway, thanks for letting me transgress over on that interesting tidbit there. But today there are, in fact, more than 300,000 designers. You know, good news. We've gone from 5 people in New York to a profession, and the profession is now quite healthy in the U.S. alone. It's a very big audience of designers out there, and that's an extremely broad-based term, graphic arts professionals. And there are probably many more than that, technically, in the marketplace right now. It'll be interesting to see what Joel's take is on that. He is in deep contact with a lot of these artists producing the work that's available at his company, but we'll dive into that later. I think the good news is we've also gone from a male-dominated industry when there were 5 men to now about 50% women. The bad news is we really have sort of a skewed racial representation, and that's quite interesting if you think about it, and if you think about the global challenges we have in getting under the skin of the target audience and truly understanding that. And the best way to sort of describe that perhaps is by saying, you know, as we face challenges in you know, expanding, you know, companies' products and services globally, and at the same time as we face challenges in diving into new niche markets, you know, and even both of those combined, like the Spanish market, for example, is without a doubt the fastest growing niche that will soon dominate even our marketing and advertising here in the United States, most likely. Hard to imagine that, but that's coming at us. But when we look at these challenges, it's really all about getting under the skin of the target audience and understanding what engages them and inspires them and motivates them. How do we do that? How do we learn to do that? And are we in the best position to do that with the current audience we have with our graphic arts professionals? And so we're going to talk about that hopefully a little bit today with Joel, because I think it's a very interesting challenge that this whole community faces. So on top of that, we have a vastly growing creative community here that has new and different roles that were unimaginable even a short 10 years ago. You know, UX, user interface titles. We've gone way beyond creative director, art director, designer, illustrator, you know, core fundamentals of the graphic arts industry, and expanded into micro roles, communication specialist, image research specialist. I mean, there are literally hundreds of titles of different professionals within this graphic arts and creative community. And that makes it more challenging, and it makes it more challenging by nature to just get work done and to find the specializations, find a way for specializations to work together to make everything happen. On top of those challenges, you know, to be successful these days, forward-thinking companies really have to think, I would argue, like old-school publishers. They have to gather ideas and develop stories and publish content that readers actually want and need. And that's difficult for a lot of big brands as well as small to mid-sized companies. It's hard for them to get their grips around that. They typically have not seen a copywriter and a designer team up, you know, within the marketing department to truly be the force field that's attracting prospect customers. Typically that was done with more marketing-driven push marketing with direct mail or advertising or, you know, pay-per-click ads perhaps, but those push advertising tactics are not connecting or resonating well with customers and readers and fans these days. So customers are literally being forced, by the way, with the help of Google that's pushing Panda and Penguin and other releases of their algorithm, they're forcing us to write original content and not publish duplicate content on our product descriptions and all kinds of interesting things. So the bottom line is a lot is changing, a lot has moved forward in this marketplace. There's a great book that I want to highly recommend to everybody in this very topic that we're speaking of today called Sisimo. It's written by Kevin Roberts, the chairman of Saatchi. So it's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. And I saw Kevin speak actually quite a few years ago at AdTech, and a good percentage of us left his speech in tears, literally. You know, with his ability to, you know, understand the importance of telling stories and advertising and how we need to pay close attention to that art as we move forward and as we continue to sell our products and services. So love marks, as he calls them, are really, you know, brands, the new brand mark that companies now seek. And what he contends is that people relate to brands these days the same way they do other people. They connect with them. They talk with them. They talk about them. They think about them. They care about them. And that's pretty remarkable that our marketing efforts have moved a company, you know, almost as in the eyes of a consumer as a person. And I think that that's really what's happening right now. But the challenges there are immense as we begin thinking of our brand as a person. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. So, you know, the screen has grown, and the screen now connects us to both brands and people. And there are basically, you know, lots of screens, and those are the current challenges we have. There are screens in our living rooms and our, you know, big in-house, in-home movie theaters, and, you know, dashboards of cars. Billboards, of course, are now digitized and are presenting multiple ads at different times of the day, depending upon who might be driving around and altering the demographics based upon who might be on the roads. It's remarkable, and of course Google Glasses is out there, and you know the screen is everywhere. You know, I think our average hours are going to go up from 8 or 9 hours a day to 10, 11, 12 hours a day when all is said and done. Most of our work days will probably be spent looking at screens. So what does this all mean? You know, where do we get all this informational content we need to turn browsers into believers and believers into buyers. Where is all of this content going to come from? That's the challenge we all face, and we want to figure that out. So I have a few tips for you that I put together that will hopefully help you as you begin thinking about imagery, and then we'll let Joel dive in and talk about the challenges that he sees himself and some of the solutions that his company provides. So number one, storytellers. I'd like to hear that name more when we think of writers and designers and perhaps even this new all-in-one designer with the advent of products like Squarespace and even WordPress. Our writers of the world and designers of the world are being asked to do it all. Code, program, put it all together, start to finish. I wonder if we're entering a new age where that will become really something critical. There was a great article about this very topic in Communication Arts this month that I would highly recommend. You're going to see another plug for CA Magazine in a few minutes, but it talked a little bit about the the destruction of the design process that used to exist, where you would meet with designers and they would comp up your website perhaps and your brand, and then they would turn that over to developers that would then execute on that vision. Those days are gone now. Why? Because first of all, coding is easier. WYSIWYG software, it makes it fast and easy to accomplish the limitations you have within a screen. Second of all, to isolate programmers and developers, the people that could create wonderful different features to software, makes no sense to get them in at the tail end of a project. They need to be in at the beginning of the project to discuss all kinds of variables that exist in the ideas and flesh those out. So it's kind of interesting what's happening now. Maybe the communications world will return to this all-in-one jack of all trades that can truly do it all. Handle images, write copy, and do lots of coding and development using WYSIWYG platforms. But no matter what, the storyteller needs to be the centerpiece of that. And if they're not, I think that's where we get lost. The story needs to be well beyond what it's going to look like and feel like. It needs to be a story, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the second tip is to certainly upgrade your image tool chest, with stock images, and really upgrade your marketing tool chest, I would argue. Stock images are here to stay. They can help augment the story and tell the story. There are literally hundreds of millions of images available now. And we've really done a service to SMBs, particularly, that can access great images produced by incredibly talented artists that can help both them and companies in expressing their story and their brand and their message. And there are also video production tools as well. So take a look at some of these. Again, you'll get a copy of the deck. And of course, VideoBlocks, Joel companies I've tried to put in the center of all of these. Thank you, Joel. But I think one of the tricks that I've learned, tip number 3 here, is to try to destock your stock images. To first of all make them original, and second of all align them with your brand. Here's an example of an image that we discovered from an illustrator online that really actually became the whole style you see on Writer Access right now was delivered to us through this wonderful illustrator that we found. And we looked at some of his stock work, and then we tested some of his stock work by greenalizing it, I like calling it, putting the original color palette into our green color palette to bring it into our brand. And this subtle, this subtle change of the stock image helped to align our brand with the stock image and deliver a much different feeling to the work and help our overall brand. So I would argue that it's good to destock. This also becomes an original image, which has lots of SEO value, one could argue. A lot of traffic, believe it or not, is driven by Google image search directly to companies' websites. Good examples of that would be landscaping companies that might want to hire photographers to go out and take images of the beautiful work they do. Those images then get hosted on their website, and of course get listed if they're smart in Google image search. And then when customers are with really good tags, by the way, keyword tags, then customers find those images and then discover your website and might end up hiring you to do similar landscape work with something that they've seen and identified. So lots of exciting stuff going on there. And tap into it. So the other tip number 4 is to really tap into surveys and focus groups and, of course, A/B multivariate testing to find out which images inspire and perform. I think this is our answer to the challenge that we have with, can our current designers on our staff or even in our country right now, adapt their skill and proficiency to get under the skin of the target audience? And the answer is yes, they can. And I think A/B and multivariate testing are by far the future of where image performance is going. It's already there really, but maybe some of the people on the line haven't heard much about it. But the net of it is it's just plain simple and easy using the free Google Analytics technology to test A/B testing to throw in 2 different images on 2 separate pages, your original page and then say an A test page, and literally keep all the copy the same, simply change the image. It could be a stock image that you can purchase very quickly and easily. You can see if 3 people outperform 1 person, which, trust me, they probably will based on history. You can begin looking at different variations and elements just of the image alone to test conversion rates. And that's the future of where it's going, and that's the answer to some of the challenges we have in the marketplace. I think it's also interesting, we have some agencies on the line I was noticing with a number of people that signed up. And I wanted to suggest that we also really need to sell creative services differently in today's marketplace. When you're putting your portfolio together, you can't just select the work that you think is the best. You need to select the work that will resonate well with, let's say, the client you're going to be speaking with. And I sold design services for almost 4 years from a couple different companies in the Boston area. What I learned in that is when I think back on my experience, I would always tend to take out Michael or Ed's, favorite portfolio pieces that always seem to inspire and wow, but it never really dawned on me that the customers looking at that portfolio were more interested in the work that would be received well by their shareholders or by their target audience. So I never really altered or varied the presentation. Instead, I just went out with what I thought was my, quote, best work. And I think that's a big mistake, and we need to sell differently these days. And that's true with our writing style, whether it be content writing services where we're trying to sell or imagery or videography. And that is even true with writer access, our model. We have stable samples by the industry that would seem to be appropriate. At least we're breaking them up by the industry. But perhaps there's a big difference between a small boutique bank versus Bank of America. Bank of America is going to be looking for a different tone and style versus a small community bank in Bangor, Maine. So I think that's worth having some interesting discussion on and thinking clearly about as we think about the images and content. So number 6, despite advertising, a career history here, creative is an adjective, not a noun. Why do I say that? So to me, creatives, if you will, get lumped into a basket, and that's really quite unfortunate, because I think there are people, I think that everyone in an individual company has the ability to have that aha moment where they can take a picture on their camera or find an image that works or develop a story that would resonate well with prospect customers. I think creative is an adjective, as mentioned, not a noun. It's not a definition of what you do for a living. It is an adjective that describes people. And I think that's kind of an interesting point, particularly given that I think with image research, for example, it's often an afterthought. It's often dumped on somebody that can just get it done. Whereas I think that people really need to look at not only the content being created, but the target audience that's going to be looking at that, put those two things together, and use creativity to find an image that would work, and then, of course, test the images to see what works best. So tip number 7 is subscribe to CA Magazine, but more specifically, follow the arts and respect the artists that can really transform ideas into works of art that can make you money and drive business growth. I would not be a happy person right now with my career and my life if I didn't get my monthly magazine delivered to my door that just fills my brain with so many ideas, not just in terms of what I'm looking at, but how they could apply to my business and how somebody has interpreted a design challenge and a business challenge and put it into a simple, easy to communicate message. So have at it and change your world literally in your business life and your personal life with a subscription to this magazine. Good plug there. Wow, I should get them on the line for that or something. Tip number 8 of 10 here is to really, I think, appreciate the distinctions between text and visuals. Text is necessary. We have to understand that. We often have to describe a product in words. A picture is not going to do that. But when you look at this balancing act that you see here of what images bring to the table and what text brings to the table, you can see the power of images and how they can lift up, these challenges that have to be written and have to be displayed. But I think this is a great slide, again, from Kevin Roberts' book, Sysmo, which I highly recommend. So tip number 9 is kind of relates to this target audience challenge that we have. So when selecting images, I would argue ditch your personal opinion and really focus on the audience and how they interpret, this image. And you need to understand subtleties amongst the audience. And I like saying that, oftentimes we look at the conversion path in polar opposites. I've often described, a web page, for example, might have 2 primary target audience, what I call ADD Andy versus sophisticated Sally. So ADD Andy wants to look at the image, feel good about it, read the headline, yep, confirm it's the product, looking at the visual, and boom, he's ready to buy. He doesn't really care about the features and the benefits. Whereas sophisticated Sally might only care about the features and the benefits. She might look for additional resources or download a PDF that offers more detailed information right on the page before she buys. We need to understand the target audience before we just start thinking about selections. Another great example of this is, selling cars, always a challenge. As it turns out, women are much more interested in safety, and environmental related issues with how cars were produced and the pollution that cars have in the marketplace. Whereas, men, particularly younger men, are more interested in, speed and features of the car itself. And other elements. So who is the target audience? Who are we creating this image and campaign for? These are subtleties that have to be worked out and thought through as you select images. And it's challenging. It's difficult to do, but thankfully we have A/B testing to rescue us so we can try and experiment with different conversion paths to see what works best. So finally, tip number 10 is, really it's an important distinction to understand that stories really engage the readers with what happens next. That's what good storytelling is all about, the suspense of what happens next. I get the fact it's difficult to do that with a 200-word description on an ad, but it is necessary to understand that people engage because of the surprise of what happens next. So we need to play into that. We need to work that angle perpetually as we create stories. Images, on the other hand, have very specific roles to grab attention, for starters, and I'll talk about that in a second, and to, of course, touch the heart, and both are necessary for success. Michael Bennis, a famous designer that I worked for a couple of years as his marketing, his agent, if you will, or marketing representative within his company, really taught me that consumers and readers and browsers, prospect customers, basically have three approaches when they see an ad in a magazine. Number one, they look at the visual in milliseconds in their brain. They make a decision whether they want to stop or not, literally milliseconds. And if they stop, you're lucky, then they'll actually read a headline. And that's all they'll read is the headline. If you're very, very lucky, a small percentage of them will actually read the copy that, ironically, we often spend so much time fussing over and rewriting and drafting and crafting these long-winded explanations of what we're offering, our benefits and our features and all this stuff. The consumer doesn't really think that through logically and doesn't set a priority over those details. Instead, their brain works differently. So we need to understand that and to use imagery and content together to really make something work. So there ends the presentation on my end, but I know some of you are excited to get a copy of both of my books. So here they are. Have at it. You're also going to get an email, just so you know, that will feature links to both of these books, as well as the slide deck, as well as an announcement of who won some free subscriptions that I mentioned earlier. So without further ado, Joel, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Byron, and I really enjoyed that presentation. I think you did a bang-up job walking through the content landscape and the importance of imagery along with more of the rich, text content. It all really does play together to create the compelling story.
Joel, tell us about your model. First of all, your company is staggeringly large in talking with you. It's really incredible what you're doing and how you're doing it. Can you sort of explain your model a little bit to people and why it's a little bit different?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd start actually by saying that, at our company we have this belief, one of our fundamental values, that is creativity is power, right? And everyone that works here came to the company because they not only needed a paycheck and a job, but they really enjoy creating and sharing something, whether it's writing, graphic design, video editing, or audio editing. And I think what's really cool there is I feel like almost everyone has some kind of inherent desire to create and share content or create and share something. And the internet has come along and created this canvas that's just unbelievably open to enabling creators, right? Bloggers. I remember when blogging first came around, I had no idea what it was, and very quickly there were 400 million blogs, right? Then Twitter came about, and it was even easier to very quickly take your ideas and share them. And then, we all know how successful Instagram has been. 150 million photographers, amateur photographers, almost overnight. And I don't think that it was the creation of any of these services that then created, like Instagram did not make photographers. I think that a lot of us had an inherent latent desire to be capturing imagery and sharing it, and all of a sudden there's a tool to do it. And so we founded the company, VideoBlocks, to basically make premium creative content affordable to all of us. Because when 10 years ago, when I was actually in high school, I was working on a small independent film project, and I hated the fact that I could not afford to purchase the B-roll or the images and the footage and the music to jazz up the project that we were working on. We had this little TV show where we would interview really cool people. And in one instance, we had the fortune of getting Arnold Schwarzenegger to sit down on camera and give advice to teenagers about what they should do with their lives. And we did this, we shot the interview. It was great advice. We then edited it and did not have the budget to buy B-roll and all these other elements. And because of that, the project turned out, I'll be honest, pretty boring, right? It was like this Charlie Rose 2-camera shoot targeted towards teens, and it was a total mismatch. And as we started looking at, how does MTV and Discovery Channel, how do these networks take relatively educational or mundane topics and make them extraordinary? And it was by layering in stock media elements. And so that was kind of enough for me to say, hey, this isn't fair. It's not fair that as an indie video maker, I don't have access to high quality stuff just because I don't have the big deep pockets of the big agencies or production companies. And so that was the impetus for launching VideoBlocks. So videoblocks.com was our first release. The concept is you pay a subscription fee of as low as $99 for an entire year, and that gets you unlimited download access. So for $8.25 a month, you can download from over 100,000 video clips, special effects, motion backgrounds, explosions, clips from almost 100 different countries. And there's no limitations on how you use those clips, right? So that's another thing that's problematic with some of the other competitors, is that they'll limit you to web use only or US use only. So for us, it's unlimited download usage, unlimited download ability, unlimited usage anywhere in the world forever. And on average, our customers are paying less than $1 for each clip they use.
Hey, Joel, I want to ask you a question about that.
Yes.
That's a great deal for customers, by the way, to have an access. How are the artists compensated? And just, in general, let's talk about VideoBlocks, first, and then let's jump to the others. But, are artists being taken care of, and how are they compensated in this model?
It's a great question, Byron. So after our belief that creativity is power, and our mission to provide premium creative content that we can all afford, there are three major stakeholders that we basically sit down in every one of our meetings and say, hey, are these people winning? One is the customer. Like, is the customer winning? And with our model, yes, they're getting access to content that they could not afford otherwise. That's great. Customers are winning. Are the content creators winning? Because if the customers are winning at the expense of the content creator, that's not good, right? That's not sustainable. So in this case, we have a very different model than Shutterstock or Getty or these others. Instead of having content creators submit content to us and then get paid upon a download, right? Kind of the hope that their stuff sells, and then in that case they get a little bit of money. We will go out and say, hey, Byron, we notice you have 1,000 clips of Africa. It's really great stuff, and our users, from the search patterns we've been looking at, they've been looking for more African footage. We would like to make you an offer to purchase rights to your material, non-exclusive rights. So you keep selling them on the other sites, keep making money like you're making it, but we'd like to pay you $50,000 or $100,000 to buy the rights to that material and drop it into our library. And so we will actually, that's kind of our models. We'll find existing content creators with great stuff, and we'll make them non-exclusive offers to take their content and drop it into VideoBlocks. Essentially what we're trying to do is say, hey, we're going to forecast the next 10 years or 20 years or perpetual payments you would receive from our competitors and pay it to you right now at times 0, so that you can take that money and go buy new equipment, go do other shoots. And what we ask for in return is the ability to then distribute this to our customers without paying commissions. Because when I mentioned that customers are getting these clips for on average less than $1 a piece, an individual commission on that would be very, very small. It would be almost insulting, in my opinion. It would be very insulting to say, hey, here's your 50 cents or 25 cents of this transaction, Byron. But when I come to you and say, hey, our minimum check size for a contributor is usually about $10,000, it's real money, right? It's real money, and we're not asking you to give up any exclusivity to your work. We're just asking for the right to make it available to our users. So so the customers win, the suppliers win, and then the third stakeholder is us, the company, right, and the employees. And we find that we win when those other two groups do well. And I think that's why we have close to 100,000 paying customers between GraphicStock, VideoBlocks, and AudioBlocks. It's a very delicate ecosystem, but you have to have each one of those groups winning, or else it all falls apart.
It does indeed. Now, tell us how GraphicStock works a little bit differently from that, because I know a lot of our writers on the line are really interested in GraphicStock and how that whole program works. And also we have a lot of writers and designers on the line that might be interested in giving, selling some work to GraphicStock potentially. So talk a little bit about how GraphicStock works differently and what some of the payouts look like over there, and also how it works from a customer perspective.
You bet. So basically, after a couple of years of running VideoBlocks, we surveyed our customers and we said, hey, it appears this model is working well because you guys, you score us high when we give Net Promoter Score surveys. You keep coming back and renewing subscriptions, so that's great. But what else could we do? Like, if we were going to take this model and apply it to another content type, should we do that? And if we did do that, what would it be? And the overwhelming feedback was, we want images, right? Because VideoBlocks was exclusively providing video, but a lot of our customers were also having a need for images, right? Imagery, graphics, vectors, icons, buttons, or photos. And so we started exploring that market and realized that the same problem existed, that there were companies like Shutterstock providing plenty of great imagery, but that it was hard for some of our customers to have to pay each time, right? Every time they wanted to grab an image and use it in a broad use way, it was expensive. And to your point earlier around, A/B testing images, a lot of our customers wanted the ability to grab a bunch of images and say, hey, I just wrote this blog post or this article. I don't know which image is the best. Or I'm doing something for a client and I don't know which image they're going to like the most. And I don't want to have to buy 10 different images knowing I'm just going to end up using one of them. So we launched GraphicStock in July of last year, so a year ago today, or this month. And it's the same model as VideoBlocks. Unlimited downloads to a repository of about 250,000 graphics, illustrations, and images, growing by the day, by the way, so it's every day there's new content. And it's the same thing. $99 gets you unlimited download access to everything on the website. And so we launched it, and we're very excited to see that a lot of our users were included people like writers and bloggers who can basically come back to the well each week or each day that they're writing and grab stuff and not have to pay. There's no pain at the pump, right? They're not having to pay every time they download. They can just go in there, grab anything they want, test a bunch of different things, and use what they need. No additional charges.
Fantastic. And are the artists winning over there as well? Similar type of model?
Yes, same exact type of model. And again, our minimum payment whenever we purchase material, it's in the thousands of dollars, and typically it's a five-figure. Typically our minimum payment to an artist is a five-figure check. And the rationale behind that is, we are asking for something different, right? We're asking for you to give us non-exclusive but perpetual rights to distribute your material to our customers, and we think it's important we reward that appropriately. And that if we came to you and said, hey, we're going to give you a couple $100, I mean, that's just insulting. But if we say, hey, here's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, that's real money that can be used to buy new equipment and invest in further creative projects.
Are you tending to literally buy their whole library? I mean, those are some pretty big numbers that you mentioned there. What's the criterion you're using to purchase those libraries?
Yeah, great question. So it all starts with our customer feedback, right, and non-explicit feedback. So we have a content team here at the company that basically looks at all the search queries that go on. So on our website, there are millions of search queries per month, and our content team looks at first of all the queries that ended in null results, or basically nothing came back, and we say, okay, here's stuff we obviously need. People are searching for it, and we don't have it. And then they'll look for trends and patterns. They'll say, wow, footage of Brazil or images of soccer are very popular right now. Maybe it's because of the World Cup. Who knows what the economic factors are, but people are asking for it. And then our content team will go out and try to find artists that have matching content that's high quality. So we'll look on competitors' websites. We'll go on Behance. We'll go on 500 Pixels and these other websites and find artists who have really high quality stuff, and then basically reach out and say, hey, Byron, really like your soccer graphics. Could we talk about potentially working with you?
Mhm. Very cool, very cool. How about audioblocks? What's going on over there?
Yes, so following in that theme of surveying our... Yep. Well, yes, win-win-win, definitely. And then following the theme of kind of surveying the customers and asking them what they want next, after GraphicStock was up and running and doing well, we stepped back again and said, okay, maybe we should build a new content vertical. And we asked the customers what else they wanted. And the next answer was audio, right? Quite specifically, what we heard was music is to video what filters are to photos. Right? That was one of my favorite little nuggets. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of true. Like if you create a video, a short 3-minute video promoting your company or about, little Johnny's soccer game, the easiest way to make it better is to add music to it, add some audio, right? It just puts it into motion. And when we started looking around at the options, again, it was just music was too expensive to license. It was too confusing to use. You needed all these different licenses for different parts of the world, different types of media. And we said, that's stupid. Like, let's go ahead and invest. So we invested this year about $1 million in buying really high quality music and launching audioblocks. We just launched about a month ago. And it's just the same thing, $99 a year for unlimited downloads of over 100,000 music tracks, sound effects, and loops, little bumpers, and things that are used in ads.
Really cool, really cool. Now, are all of these companies driven from the same database, so your accounts are good in one place and the other? How have you set up the infrastructure from a tech perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So they all have a very similar look and feel, though audioblocks is a little bit different because we actually built a whole music discovery engine. We found that the way you search for images and video is textual, right? Like you'll actually type in White House, right? Whereas with music, it's more of a mood. And so when you go to audioblocks, you actually search, if you want to, by mood and genre and feel. But other than that, the sites all look, smell, and taste very similar, just very different content verticals. Mm-hmm. They do not share the same database, though they do share the same database infrastructure. And we do, when you become a member of one, we make it even less expensive to become a member of the other two, right? Mm-hmm. So as you start logging, if you're a VideoBlocks user, as you log into your account, you'll start to see offers to add on, right, to basically add on subscriptions to GraphicStock or to audioblocks. So we've tried to make it... Yeah.
And if you add on a subscription, can you go right from one to the other? Is it the same username, or is it a separate user ID for each of the models?
Yes, you can. You can use the same username and password, and we are actually making this a single sign-on process so that it's even simpler, right? So that when you go, if you're signed into one, you're automatically signed into the others. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. You just don't necessarily have a cash balance, so you can't access anything, but you can get to it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool. Let's go back to your vision of the future and where things are going. I mean, do you feel like you're putting food on the table for artists that they wouldn't have discovered before without your channel? Do you think that it's or are we commoditizing this whole industry? Remember that there are people in the artistic community, photographers in particular, that were making a very good living working with those old ad agencies, making $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 photo shoots back in the day, right? Those days are kind of gone. Professional photographers in particular have had to change the way they work and the way they do business. It's also, there are a lot more photographers out there as a result of stock houses that are able to sell their work and to attract more people to the industry. What's happening in your mind in the industry as a whole? More smaller pieces of the pie being distributed to a larger group? Are the kings truly still the kings that can command those $10,000 a day rates and the high premium to their work? What's your take on the industry?
Yeah, I love that question because it's a great question. Here's my take. My take is that the days of old are past, right? I mean, you kind of mentioned that, back in the day it was like five men who had started graphic design. And that's great. That's a great start, right? You fast forward to today, there's 300,000 designers, still pretty male-dominated, very Caucasian, but moving, in the right direction. And to me, the right direction is total democratization, which means anyone that wants to create and make a living creating can do so. And in the past, if you didn't have the ability to go to a great school to get the right degree, to get into the old boys network, right, at a big ad agency, you couldn't make money doing graphic design. That just wasn't a thing. Now all of a sudden the internet comes along, and as long as you're talented, there's a way to make money regardless of your geographic location, of your upbringing, of your educational background. And that's the audience that we get most excited about. It's enabling total democratization of, it's the creative class, the mass creative class, as we kind of call it, where most of our customers could not afford. When we survey them, over 50% say that they're actively trying to make money from graphic design or freelance work of some sort, that they're in a job they don't enjoy at the time, but they're trying to get into the creative world to make money. And that, by the way, they could not afford to buy stock imagery or stock video from other outlets. And so over half of our customer base has never purchased from any other competitor. They came across our model and were like, wow, we can actually afford this. So personally, I look at it as we are kind of feeding the enthusiasts, the individuals who are trying to break into the creative profession, so they can then work up the ladder. And I think at the end of the day, just like content is king, I think that really talented creative individuals always rise to the top. Like if you're a talented singer, you're going to do well. If you're a talented artist, you're going to do well. If you're a talented photographer, you'll find a way to do well. But I just like the fact that now everyone has a chance to get into it and take a shot at being talented.
Well said. Well answered. To a tough question, I might add. Here's a question that came in. Can someone who subscribes to GraphicStock use an image to create a product, like a T-shirt or a mug, to then sell?
Yes, so this is a great question. We're very lenient with our licensing. So you can, we say as long as you're adding some sort of substantial value to the image, then you can, you couldn't take it and sell it again as a stock image, but that's almost the only restriction. If you're putting it on a T-shirt, I would say that's adding value, and you're good to go, right? Like, you might, you need to add substantial value. So if the T-shirt has a design or a look that is somewhat unique to your company, yes, you're in good shape. And I think that I'd also mention, like for writers specifically, I always feel bad when a writer's written a really great post and they embed an image and then have to link out from that image to the source, right? We don't require that. Like if you want to use images from GraphicStock in your posts, in your articles, you don't need to caption them. You don't need to give us attribution, if you don't want to. Just give it a good caption. I mean, the image draws people in. The caption, by the way, is one of the most read pieces of an article, right? There's so many studies that show people love captions. And I think it's kind of it's a waste to promote us in your caption when it's, your article and your audience. You don't need to do that.
Cool. Someone also asked a question about, I did an Amazon search for Sissimo by Mark Roberts, and I couldn't find it. It's actually Kevin Roberts. That's what's listed in my slide deck, and you'll get a copy of that as well. Thanks for asking that. Another person asked, when a client asks for hyperlinks, I assume they mean images. Would links to related videos be appropriate? Great question there. So that's one of our writers, and they received an order that a client is asking them to hyperlink their content over to various sources. That's a little bit different than linking over to an image. So I just wanted to clarify that for one of our writers. However, I would link to the video if you mention the video in your content and you thought the video was amazing and great. Interesting idea for you to host the video, say, on your personal blog and then link over to it. I think a client might get a little bit upset about that if you're kind of self-promoting yourself. I'd probably stay away from that. Typically, hyperlinks with our clients are referred to link over to authority content, and here's a list of sites that I want you to link to. So I thought I'd clarify that. Another cool question somebody asked was, do you feel design styles, Joel, you can take this, do you feel that design styles, i.e. flat versus layered, depth, textured, should be universal across all industries or tailored to the situation? What are some industries that benefit more from design style than the next? It's an interesting question. It must be a designer that's beginning to, take a look at this. Do you have any thoughts on design styles?
Yeah, I find this topic very fascinating because styles change very quickly, and they're always adapting, right? So if you told me 3 years ago, 2 years ago that flat design was going to be a thing, I would have been shocked, right? Because flat design, like I remember the first AOL CD I received in like 1997, it was all flat design, right? And then all of a sudden we got into more three-dimensional, more bezeled and embossed, right? It was like, because computers could handle it, design got heavier. And now all of a sudden we're reverting back to a nice light, clean, flat design, driven mainly by mobile, by the way. I mean, mobile applications benefit greatly from flat design. But I never would have guessed. So, the question about it being industry specific, yes, I think that different industries certainly have different design styles that resonate, and then the only real answer, and I hate to make it sound like a popularity contest, but if you look at what is popular and you're working for a client, typically the client's going to want to be the cool kid at the party, which means wearing the same type of jeans, right? And so then it gets interesting. It's like, how do you innovate? Like, what if you want to be the cool kid at the party wearing, tie-dye jeans? Well, you can take that shot, you can take that risk, and maybe that becomes a new style, right? Maybe after flat design, it's all about tie-dye on the internet. I don't know, but I think that we certainly watch trends very closely here, and when we see a new trend emerging, we very quickly support it by buying up the imagery that's going to, enable that trend to go forward.
Cool. Someone had a question about examples of campaigns that might be using, or companies and brands that might be using some of your videos or graphics. And that's an interesting question because I'm sure, like us here at Writer Access, you're bound by confidentiality agreements. Once your customer buys that image, that they have rights and access to, they have no obligation to disclose that's from you, correct?
That's true. Yeah, that's right. They have no obligation at all. But I can certainly comment on some of the places I've seen our stuff used in the wild. One of my favorite shows is Parks and Recreation on NBC, and NBC uses a lot of our stock footage in their shows. Anytime there's a skyline or some sort of B-roll shot, it doesn't make sense for them to, even though they have massive budgets, even NBC says, hey, let's go ahead and download this image, this video clip, because it's just faster and less expensive than sending a crew to get it, right? Mm-hmm. On the graphics front, one of my favorite uses recently was a microbrewery. So there's this microbrewery that was trying to design a new logo and a whole brand for their brewery, and they ended up using some graphic stock assets and incorporating them into their logo and brand, and it was a really big hit with their customers. So that was cool. We have schools and churches that are using our content in classrooms and in their multimedia, sermons. Right? That's neat. And then there's kind of the target market that I really like, which is all these freelancers who are working on projects for their clients, whether they're advertisements, video ads, or graphic, print ads, or even audio jingles. I mean, there's very wide usage ability for this material, and it's priced so that anybody can afford it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the slides I mentioned was how how selling creative services needs to change, and how designers, and I really think that putting together custom presentations, here's the slide right here, selling creative services needs to change. You should almost be putting together spec work if you're going after a $10,000 to $50,000 project just as an add-on, to showcase how you can bring together different imagery and truly understand the target audience. So you agree with that?
Yeah, and by the way, wouldn't it be nice when you go to your client and say, hey, I have 10 different ideas I want to show you here, and you didn't want to have to purchase all those 10 different stock images from a site, and so a lot of times you'll have to do is show them watermarked images, and that ruins it, right? That's like, it just ruins the whole feng shui of the presentation. So with GraphicStock, you just download them and use them. No watermarks. You've already paid for it. It's all yours.
What is your take on spec work, Joel? You and I have actually talked about this before, so I'd love to get your thoughts, publicly here in front of everyone. But it is getting easier. I mean, spec work is spec work. You have business models out there like 99 Designs, which I think are not great. The talent pool is not really winning over there. 100 people submit a logo design, only one person gets selected, which means 99 people basically lose and have wasted time. That business model needs to be fixed. But the other extreme of the model is Monster.com, Career Builder, which are, even Elance, I would argue, are glorified help wanted ads, really, where writers are also, once again, writers, designers, illustrators are forced to, ironically put together, written communication explaining in quotes on what they would charge for a project. Once again, wasting time. Do you think there's something fresh and innovative out there? Do you think that there's a better matchmaking type of model that that could potentially exist, and particularly as it relates to spec work, and someday over the rainbow, how easy it would be to, to use stock imagery and use, call it sketching, to win a project rather than a typed out 1,000-word summary that is, let's face it, fairly boring, with a bid number on the bottom of it saying, okay, here's my summary, $1,000, and I'll do this for you. What's your take on that as it relates to your portfolio and how easy it is to access images?
Well, I think that the short answer is I do think there's a better way than the way it's currently being done. Right? I think on one extreme, as you mentioned, you've got an Elance where you describe what you're going to do and try to sell the premise of what you can create, and then get selected as the only creator. But there's a lot of risk on the customer side there because they haven't really seen a lot. They're going off of that written description of what you're going to do. Now on the other end of the extreme, you're on 99 Designs, and the customer wins really well there because the customer gets to sit back and look at tons and tons of ideas and designs and then just pick the one they like. But the one they choose wins and all others lose. It's a zero-sum game in that case, right? So there I think the balance is off because the customer wins, but the suppliers generally lose. Most of them do. So I think there's got to be a middle way where you can find a hybrid between doing complete spec work, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, you need to be able to make money from the work you're doing for clients. It's not fair to think otherwise. If you're going to do spec work your whole life, you're going to starve. That doesn't work. I think that to do a little work with the aim and goal of getting a paid contract, that makes sense as long as it works out. So, I know it's not a perfect answer, but I guess I would say there's got to be a middle way between Elance, where it's too text heavy and it doesn't really there's too much risk for the customer, and no risk for the supplier, versus 99 Designs, where there's no risk for the customer but too much risk for the supplier. There's got to be something that balances those two.
Have you ever thought about going into the template business, template block, referring specifically to website template designs, basically?
Yeah, we have thought about it. It's certainly a big industry. It's not surprisingly a very big business. A lot of websites out there and tons of new ones coming on by the day. So we have thought about it. Thus far, we have not built a product for it, but it's not to say we won't at some point, because there are some really good resources out there right now. So like Squarespace, Wix, and Weebly, some of these groups are starting to make WYSIWYG design actually is sexy and easy, right? Sexy and easy. Before it was easy but not sexy. Now it's kind of a little bit of both.
Well, listen, we're probably at the end of our webinar here. Just to be fair with time, we're about 5 minutes over. So I want to thank you for being on the line and thank everybody for all the questions. Thanks so much for being on with us today.
Oh, Byron, I really appreciate it, man. This was a lot of fun, and I hope it was somewhat helpful for the listeners. I know your presentation was. I learned a lot from it. So thank you for that bang-up job.
Really appreciate your helping out with the effort and helping with the promotion and everything else. Your company is fantastic. It's exploding in growth, and we threw some tough questions at you as well, so you did a great job answering everything, Joel.
Well, thanks. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. And remember, creativity is power. We really do believe that.
Right on. Same here. Same camp. So until next month, everyone, I hope you learned a lot, and we'll look forward to having you tune in next month. Thanks, everyone. And everyone, once again, will be getting a copy of this deck, as well as a link to a live recording, and links to my 2 books, which I'm giving away for free, and an announcement of the 3 winners from the presentation. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.